welcome to Managing Your Cellular Data Plan with Jamf. My name's Larry Stiegel, and I'm a sales engineer here at Jamf. During today's session, we're going to talk about the benefits of cellular iPads in education and business. Basically, how can we remove the limits of Wi-Fi? We're going to talk about how Jamf can assist in activating these resources. We're going to talk about how Jamf can assist your organization in reaching data usage goals and avoiding the ever fearful throttling. And quite possibly one more thing. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the 3 Ds of education. And no, this is not my second grade report card. The first D is the digital divide. How did we address this issue? In this space, education provided access to resources. We saw the growth of computer labs, iPads in the classroom, and even one-to-one device initiatives. We needed to get the resources in the hands of our students. Why? Because our students are digital natives. How are we providing rigor in the learning environment? How do we empower our users? Today's technologies become a vital resource in people's everyday lives. iPhones and iPads are now the norm rather than the exception. We see developers writing apps while they're still in elementary school. So how can we best leverage these resources to make sure our users are more productive? How can we ensure that we have access to cloud-based systems to challenge our users every single day? And then there's a new term that's come into play in education, and that term is the digital desert. What is this issue? Why should we be concerned about it? What is the digital desert? Connected Nation in 2019 refers to areas where families, businesses, libraries, schools, and even entire communities that don't have access to high-speed broadband internet as digital deserts. A study entitled Look at Broadband Access Providers and Technology examined and analyzed broadband coverage data released by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. And what researchers from Purdue University and Oklahoma State University found was a little bit concerning. In 2017, Norman, Oklahoma's largest ward incorporated about half the city's geography. But when it came to internet and cell phone service, it was a world apart from the rest of the city. I can sum it up in one word: poor. Ward 5 resident and 2017 Mayor Lynn Miller stated, "Poor to awful. I can't even get my cell phone to work in my house half the time." Crossing East 48th Street is like falling off a cliff, digitally speaking, with internet speeds plummeting to as low as 1 megabit per second in some areas. One resident shared, "You can't do anything with that. I mean, YouTube buffers, that's about it. It's pretty darned ridiculous." So for our purposes, we can also refer to digital deserts as locations without any access, especially where students are concerned. Sometimes we hear our students say, "I have Wi-Fi in my house." And in a remote learning world, we have to be aware of these areas and plan on how to address these issues. One of the ways that we looked at addressing it was we started looking at hotspots. Hotspots are a really quick resource in allowing our students who don't have Wi-Fi at home to access the cellular network. Basically, a hotspot bridges a cellular data connection and enables a Wi-Fi device to access it. But one of the things we need to be aware of is data management at the device level can be extremely difficult because the device always thinks it's on Wi-Fi. It never understands that it might be using cellular. We can have multiple users on a single device, meaning we're carving up that speed and we're seeing a drop in performance. And then finally, it's just another resource, something to get lost, something to keep plugged in, some battery to ensure it's fully charged. So we begin to see the advent of cellular-based enabled iPads. And to understand how these work, we have to understand the term SIM. So what is a SIM? Well, simply put, a SIM is a subscriber identity module. It identifies the user or subscriber to a network, and there are two basic kinds of SIMs. One is called a PSIM or a physical SIM. This is a plastic card with a metal strip which contains information. Physical SIMs are inserted into a device so the device can access a cellular data network. SIMs are carrier specific but can easily be changed by simply removing and inserting another SIM. Now, here are examples of PSIMs or physical SIMs. eSIM, the newer technology, is an embedded SIM. This is actually a chip or component on the board of the cellular data iPad. The advantage to eSIMs is they can be programmed and do not need to be physically exchanged. So let's take a moment and think about how hotel room keys have changed and why. In the past, when we went to a hotel, we would get a physical key. It was secure, it allowed us access to the resource or room we were renting. Very stable. But what happened if we lost a key? What happened if the room key needed to be exchanged? We would have to go back to the hotel room or notify them. The drawback is now, if we've lost a key, the hotel has to exchange the key module. They have to send a locksmith there to update and exchange that physical component. Makes it difficult, and during that time, the room is not available for use. So, what did hotels do? They gave us electronic keys, the beginnings of the plastic cards, and now, even today, some hotels provide us apps. Why? Because they're programmable, they're easily exchanged. If a key gets lost, we can deactivate it. It makes it easier for the hotel to maintain its security. Now, the key to understanding eSIMs and SIMs in general, the real magic, is something called an ICCID. What is the ICCID? Basically, it's a unique number that's used to tell one SIM card, whether it's a PSIM or an eSIM, from another. And that ICCD is identified as the Integrated Circuit Card Identifier. Again, both eSIMs and PSIMs have them. Now, your PSIMs are programmed from your vendor, your carrier. They actually record the information on the physical card and put the card in the phone for you, or send it to you and allow you to do it yourself. Well, how do we get that information onto an eSIM? Because it's programmable. Well, we need to get some information to our carrier. We have to be able to configure the eSIM. How do we do it? Well, there are two critical components for the eSIM to be programmed or provisioned. You'll hear the term an eSIM profile. Have you ever unboxed and looked at a cellular data iPad? There are two new numbers that are going to appear on the label for you. The first is something called an IMEI, or the International Mobile Equipment Identity. It's a unique number to the device. The second number that you'll need to know is the EID, or the Embedded Identity Document. These two pieces of information you will provide to your cellular carrier, and they will in turn provision an eSIM profile for you. Now, take a moment and think. That's not a problem if you have one device. What if you have 100 devices? Here's where you can leverage your sales team at Apple. Contact them, either in education or business, and say, I would like a list of my IMEI and EID numbers. And they should be able to provide those for you after your order is placed. If they're not, simply use a barcode reader and record this information and get it to your carrier. Now, our goal is to get from this pre-activation state with our iPads, where we see that the carrier is iPad. By default, that's how Apple will identify the resource. We won't see a cellular data number. Sometimes they look like phone numbers, and chances are that ICCID will be blank. Once activated, we want to see that we will now see our carrier, in this case, the cellular data company, a cellular data number that will help us track down information about our account on this specific device, and the ICCID, that number that identifies the resource and allows it access to the cellular data network. So now we're going to go through how do we activate these devices? Not doing it manually, not doing it in a store, but actually doing this in our location. So I want you to take a moment and think about your initial purchase experience with Apple. Whether you're a school or business, you're going to contact your vendor and you're going to say, I want to make a purchase of goods and services. In this case, we're going to purchase our iPads. Now, we know that there's cellular data, so we ask our Apple representative to provide us that IMEI and EID number, which they do. Next, Apple is going to take our cellular data iPads and they're going to place them into our Apple School or Apple Business Manager instance so that we can leverage Apple's automated device enrollment program. Now we're going to contact our cellular data carrier and we're going to provide to them that comprehensive list of our EID and IMEI numbers so they can provision our eSIM profiles. Here, you'll want to work with your cellular data carrier and determine when those profiles need to be provisioned. Some carriers may start charging you for the service when the profile is provisioned. Other carriers may charge you for the service when it's installed. Verify with your carrier which approach they're going to use, and that will determine when you stage or prepare profiles. Now Apple will deliver our devices to us and we're ready to take the next step. We're going to go through the activation and the enrollment in our MDM system. This is where Jamf comes into play, both Jamf Pro and Jamf School. The iPad is going to contact Apple's activation server, and this can be done either by using a Wi-Fi connection or a tethered connection to another device. Once it hits the activation server, it will be determined whether it's in your Apple School Manager or Apple Business Manager instance. If it is, it will look to see if it's been assigned to your MDM, in this case, your Jamf Pro or Jamf School server. And then the automated device enrollment process begins. At this point, we enroll the device, and we can begin to send MDM commands, applications, configuration profiles, other elements. But one special command that we as MDM managers or administrators want to send is the refresh cellular command. This command is going to tell the device to contact your carrier and download and install that eSIM profile. Once you push this command from the console, the device takes over. And this is the workflow there. Once the device receives that command, it's going to contact the carrier. The carrier will provide you a specific URL. And then the eSIM profile will be downloaded from their servers to the device and installed. Once the profile is installed, the device can now access the cellular data network of the carrier, which means the internet comes into play. And your device can now travel on the cellular data network and access internet resources. And the last piece of the workflow is your device will submit its comprehensive inventory into your Jamf Pro or Jamf School server. This information will include your carrier, the phone number or the cellular data number, and the ICC ID number. Those are critical pieces of information for you. Now remember, we told you that you're going to send this refresh cellular command. What does it do? Well, you can actually go into great details and look at the developers' documents on Apple's website. But simply put, what the refresh cellular command does is it tells your Apple cellular device to contact a specific server called the Subscription Manager Data Preparation Server. This entity, which cellular data operators use, securely encrypts for over-the-air installation within the eSIM. Basically, this resource secretly packages those profiles to be provisioned on something called the EUICC, or the Embedded Universal Integrated Circuit Card. Some people will call the eSIM and the EUICC the same term, even though there's a slight difference. The eSIM is the hardware component, and the EUICC is the software component that allows the remote provisioning of multiple network profiles. Now, once you've activated your cellular data iPad and it has an eSIM, we need to be conscious of something, and that is if we ever need to erase the device. Why? Because if we erase the device and we're not careful, we could erase the eSIM profile. If we erase the eSIM profile, we have to contact our carrier and they have to make a new eSIM profile. Because once the eSIM profile is downloaded and installed on your device, it's removed from the SMDP server. So if you're on a device that has an eSIM profile and you go into the Settings app and you decide to erase the device, you'll see a dialog box similar to this one. Basically, it asks if you want to erase your content. Always make sure that you keep that cellular plan, because it will erase everything but maintain that eSIM profile. Now, what happens if we're using a Jamf Pro system and we decide to send a remote wipe command from Pro? Well, if we send that wipe command, we automatically will see a window similar to this. By default, we check Retain the Cellular Data Plan. This will be the same window whether you're sending this to a group of devices or a single device. The key is Retain the Cellular Plan. If we're in education and we're using Jamf School, again, be aware we can send a remote wipe command to a single device or a group of devices. In Jamf School, we want to preserve that cellular data plan if it's present on the device. And again, this can be a multiple action for a group of devices or a single resource. Now, what kind of a scale can you use when you're deploying out cellular data iPads? You can do 1, 10, 100, even 1,000 we've seen customers deploy. The key is in staging your resources. As with any kind of a technical resource, you want to start small and slowly move forward. If you're deploying 1,000 iPads and you're going to send that remote wipe or the remote refresh command to those resources, start out with a group of 10 to 20, and if you're successful, go to 40 to 50. It all is a number of variables that you got to take into account. It could be your network, it could be your carrier's activation servers. You just don't want a bunch of commands out there hanging around waiting to execute. Jamf School has a unique feature which gives us the ability to go ahead and put in that eSIM URL so that the devices will activate. We don't have to send a remote command. In Jamf School, instead of pre-stage enrollments as we have with Jamf Pro, we use something called Automated Device Enrollment Profiles. In your Automated Device Enrollment Profiles for iOS devices, you'll now see a new tab that says eSIM Settings. Here, you can actually enter in that carrier URL that your provider will give to you. And as soon as the device is enrolled in Jamf School, it will automatically send that command, or that command will be executed with the device, and the profile will get provisioned. Now, one of the things that we always work with our cellular data iPads is we want to make sure that we're using the correct applications as intended, whether it's in business or in education. Within Jamf School and Jamf Pro, we give you the ability to manage data usage limits on these devices. Simply put, we can determine which applications can access the cellular data network and which applications can access Wi-Fi only. For example, if we put in a profile and we're managing our limits and we state that we want to ensure that we're only going to use certain resources, we create a configuration profile. In this case, we're going to set custom data usage rules. So what we want is for our students, we don't mind if they're using the cellular data network for Google Classroom and Google Drive, but because video conferencing is so intensive, we're not going to enable Cisco WebEx to be utilized on the cellular data network. In this case, WebEx will work on Wi-Fi, but it just won't work. They can't utilize it on the cellular data network. Why do we want to put these data usage rules in place? Well, it depends on our plans. Some cellular data plans have certain caps. Others, when you reach a certain data usage, implement something called throttling, where they intentionally reduce your speed. So you always want to ensure that you're utilizing the correct resources as the organization sees fit. And again, we can achieve the same thing within the Jamf School application. As you'll see here, we've identified certain resources like Jamf School Student and Jamf Teacher to utilize the cellular data network, but we've made a conscious decision at this time not to use Zoom. Now, if there is a point during our time we want to make this change, we simply go into our Jamf Pro or our Jamf School, make a modification to the configuration profile, and then the users will be able to use the application on the network. Again, the advantage of MDM. One of the other components that we give you the capability within our Jamf Pro and Jamf School system is the ability to switch carriers. Why would you ever want to switch a carrier? Aren't all carriers equal in all places? Well, have you ever heard somebody say, when I'm downtown, Safari just doesn't really work that well on my iPhone. They need to fix it. But a person standing right next to them says, Safari's fine on my iPhone. You must have a bad carrier. Well, that might not be totally inaccurate. Some carriers have better coverage in some areas for data within the city limits. I have personally seen on a same device one carrier providing a speed over their cellular network of 2 megabits download, and then switching to another carrier, seeing 50 megabits per download. The other option is your contract could be up. Your new carrier might provide you better terms, and we need to be able to change that carrier. And finally, there could be areas in your community where cellular service might not be at the same level. You could be experiencing almost a digital desert in parts of your service area by one carrier, and another carrier may be outstanding. So how do we achieve switching carriers? Well, oddly enough, it's very similar to the same process that we use when we do that initial provisioning. And finally, how are our end users impacted? How do they experience this switch? Well, switching carriers is not a difficult process. Again, you're going to need to gather your data and communicate with the new carrier, providing them the EID and the IMEI number. They're going to provision your eSIM profile, and then use Jamf Pro or Jamf School to send a command to that device, and it's going to update it with a new eSIM profile to a new carrier. Once the new eSIM profile is installed, it becomes the default profile, becomes the profile the system will use. Again, as we saw with our previous when we did the initial activation, all we have to do for changing a plan is get with our Jamf Pro or Jamf School server, send that remote MDM command to the device. The device is going to contact the SMDP servers from our carrier. We're going to get delivered the new eSIM profile, which will be installed on our device. Our device will then activate with the new carrier settings. We'll go to the new carrier's network, and then we'll travel on the internet. And then our device will submit its inventory back to the Jamf Pro server with updated settings. So switching carriers, how are users impacted? Well, bottom line, they're going to see improved service, which hopefully will mean we'll get a better data usage and better resource usage. Some common notifications that we'll see on cellular data devices are things like carrier settings may need an update, and these are usually provided by your carrier and submitted to Apple. You could see a message that a cellular plan is ready to be installed. When you're setting up a number of devices, simply ignore this message and use the refresh cellular command from your Jamf Pro or Jamf School server. The last one, unable to complete cellular plan change. This occurs when you send the refresh cellular command and an eSIM profile is not available on the SMDP server. Doesn't really hurt the system, but it can be irritating and concerning to the users. One final thing I want to cover with you, Apple has brought forward, is the ability for an iPhone to have two lines. Beginning with the iPhone XS and XR, Apple has given us the ability to have two separate lines on our iPhone. One phone line can be assigned to the pSIM or physical SIM, and the other phone line can be assigned to an eSIM. In fact, you could even use two different carriers if you wanted to. To be able to use this feature, of course, the phone must be unlocked. It can't be carrier locked. If you're interested for supplemental information on this, you can always look at an Apple support article, and that number is HT209044. And both phone lines are active at the same time, so you can switch between them. In my case, I designate one phone line for business and the other phone line for personal use. I can even go in and assign to a contact which phone number to use by default. We've provided for you some additional resources for your review. One is the eSIM iPad setup with Jamf Pro, and the other is the eSIM iPad setup with Jamf School. So let's recap. We started this journey talking about how can we remove some of the limitations of Wi-Fi. And we shared with you some organizations use things like hotspots, but Apple gives us the capability with cellular data iPads to have the option to carry around a single device, not a hotspot and our iPad. We showed you how Jamf can assist in configuring these resources, as well as, if necessary, setting data usage limits, identifying which systems we can determine using what applications. And we can do it at a device level if we choose, giving us the ability to maximize this limited resource. And finally, we talked about some of the common messages you might see when you're working with cellular data resources. Hopefully you enjoyed that little bonus feature of having an iPhone that has two active lines at the same time. Makes it a lot easier for me, so that way I can ensure when I'm calling my customers, I'm using my professional business line. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this session has been informative for you, and thank you for listening.